Hello guys, and let's discuss a brilliant idea of President Zelensky to create the European army, a joint army of all European countries to protect ourselves against Russia. I know many are quite optimistic about the potential negotiations, but let's be realistic. Russia is a country that has already demonstrated its violent and aggressive character, and right now most of the Russian economy is a war economy. They have hundreds of thousands of people involved in the army, and it is impossible to stop it in a blink of an eye. Most importantly, with his behavior, with his words, with his actions, violating the borders of many NATO countries with aircraft and drones, Putin illustrated he is prepared to fight more and again until he is completely defeated. Trust me, I'm Ukrainian. I had this lesson when back in 2014 the world persuaded us that let's appease the Kremlin goblin, let's not escalate, and that will end with the eastern Ukraine. Then now some people say that can actually finish with Ukraine, but no. Putin is definitely prepared to continue, maybe to Poland, maybe to the Baltics, maybe to Moldova, and maybe to all of these countries, and there are definitely symptoms. So let's discuss in this video that I personally consider very important the dangers that Russia now imposes not just on Ukraine, the reasons and the background for the creation of the new European armed forces, and why it is important for the future relations between the European Union and the United States. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see the defeat and demilitarization of Russia, subscribe, we discuss all of that on the channel. And let's start with this brilliant idea that President Zelensky shared today, the creation of the joint army of the European Union or Europe. Because since recently, more and more headlines describe this really big and diverse continent as just like one country. Let it be, I don't mind. And a kind and important reminder, Ukraine is also Europe. Ukrainian army is a very big and a very experienced army right now, and honestly is the only, apart from the enemy armies, that has skills of modern warfare. Drones, like robots and artificial intelligence. Many of the best NATO training centers did not experience anything similar because this is a full-scale big war, something that did not happen on our continent since the Second World War. So Ukrainian people, Ukrainian experience is extremely valuable for the defense of the world from the Russian expansion. And I like that President Zelensky shared this idea. I was actually surprised to learn long ago that such army does not exist, taking into account how many different programs, shared organizations and institutions are present inside the European Union. Well, all of us lived in a normal world. Our normalcy bias persuaded us that no wars are possible in the 21st century. But unfortunately, we have Russia, and Russia still lives in the Middle Ages. I think this idea will be supported by many European leaders, especially taking into account a very weird stance of President Trump that during the negotiations, European leaders will be absent from the conversation. At first, he even did not mention Ukraine, but perhaps after a wave of negative reactions, he included President Zelensky, but excluded EU leaders. And that is very wrong, especially taking into account that according to the American plan, it is our European partners who are supposed to provide security guarantees. Then I have this very big question. Why on earth should America negotiate with Putin if Europeans are to fulfill these promises? And why they are not at the table of negotiations? I am sure this will change because from these recent days, all we see is that President Trump has a very specific negotiation technique, tactics, where he says contradictory very emotional things and then perhaps test the population. Personally, I don't like it, and I feel a lot of people around me don't like it, but we'll see what it brings. At least Macron decided to make a meeting in Paris, and the majority of EU leaders greeted this idea with support because they do have to develop common policy. Unfortunately, it seems like the United States does not see Europe as an ally, which is very wrong, taking into account how quickly Russia, North Korea, China developed very, very strong alliances. Subscribe to see the defeat of this axis of evil. We can do it together, and I'm sure that the future of Europe and the United States are very closely and positively, effectively intertwined, and Ukraine is Europe. So right now, we see that another tendency that I want to correct. Here in Ukraine, we are very grateful to all the nations that supported Ukraine in this fight against Russian imperial, very violent aggression. But let's not undermine each other's support, because sometimes when you listen to speeches of JD Vance, for example, it seems like the European Union did nothing, when in reality, the support from the European country is really great. And some countries like Denmark, greeting to people, actually gave almost like every defense they had to Ukraine, which is like incomparable. The country is not that big as the United States, but comparing to what they have and their population, this is a very great support. And most importantly, I know that President Trump would love to have a Nobel Peace Prize. That's at least what I read in the newspapers. But you cannot get a Nobel Peace Prize for protecting mineral resources. People have to be in the focus. And when we listen to this new conversations about Ukraine in the White House, they are mainly about the number of funds spent, the resources that must be protected. And what I still cannot accept is this equating of Ukraine and Russia, saying that both nations should not go to war. Ukraine must protect its motherland. It is a totally different kind of war. Please like this video and share it if you support my opinion. Unfortunately, right now we see that Putin has this veto inside NATO, which is insane, but literally based on Putin's desire. Some of the strongest NATO countries deny Ukraine, the largest European country, the most trained European country to defend you against the Russian evil, deny this entry even after the war ends. I am sure that the future will change it and Ukraine belongs to NATO, but sometimes I do have this very worrisome feeling that NATO is already broken. There were a number of times when NATO countries should have reacted. I'm not saying like bombing Moscow, but declaring something more like direct. And I am worried that if we freeze this war and we do not provide any serious punishment for Russia and sanctions are taken away, and President Trump mentioned that a couple of times, and Russia has this huge military war machine that is rolling, and actually the majority of jobs and profit now comes from this military industry. They cannot stop it just because Trump said so. And they will take this time to regroup, to mobilize people in this hidden way when they don't need to announce conscription, which is good for them. Get more North Korean soldiers, involve Belarus because they plan something like training in summer with more than 100,000 soldiers, and that could particularly mean more invasions to Ukraine, Poland, or the Baltics. You will say that's impossible, NATO will react. I doubt. Well, maybe. I'm all in, but with some of the Trump's comments, with lots of drones, missiles already traveling to NATO countries with no reaction, Putin can try something minor. I'm not saying traveling with tanks, but doing something minor and demonstrating to everyone that NATO is not working. Actually, Article 5 was used just once, but the United States, and never else. And we don't know what will happen right now. I don't like it, honestly, that the United States seem not to see the European Union as allies. And even if there are some things you don't like about Europe, we don't like about I don't like a lot of things about myself, but I'm in peace with myself, and I know that we have to support each other. Just look how China supports Russia. And one more thing that I am 100% confident, Trump cannot make Putin break up with Xi. I am sure that they will outplay him if it is unfortunately going to develop in that negotiations with Xi, Putin, and I don't see that America, China, and Russia sitting at the table and dividing the world. It's not the world we all want to live in. It's just like a fog, or maybe that's the tactics, just to push all the buttons and to look what happens and how people feel about that. And once again, in all of this context, Zelensky's idea to create a strong army inside Europe, protecting Europe, and I'm sure that the Ukrainian soldiers will be ready to be the backbone of this army. And look how many soldiers actually quit in Britain, in Poland. There are masses of people who don't want to serve because they feel that the Third World War is coming. And Ukrainians already have this experience, and in good environment, with the support, with modern weapons, they are prepared to do that. And hopefully they won't need to fight. They will simply protect the borders of Europe from the evil, from the Russian evil. Of course, much better way is to defeat, demilitarize Russia and forget about that. But the idea of joint armed forces of Europe seems great to me. Let me know in the comments below, what is your opinion? Join me on X. I'm fighting that. It's super toxic and I keep seeing various Russian propaganda BS. Join me on Blue Sky. Our community is growing, 11,000 soon. Instagram, I'm sharing more of everyday life there, and Threads, and we have an amazing Discord community. Check our merch shop for lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for being friends of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!